It is 10:02. Good morning. I'm Lucas Panzica. Conference championships are in the books, but the coaching carousel does not stop moving in college football. According to multiple sources, Miami has fired head coach Manny Diaz. Also, sources saying they will be going after Oregon head coach Mario Cristobal. Tennessee going bowling in Music City. The Vols will take on Purdue in the TransPerfect Music City Bowl in Nissan Stadium December 30th, we learned in the College Football Playoff Selection Show on Sunday. And after championship weekend, Alabama took the 1 seed in the CFP. They will play Cincinnati in the semifinals, while Georgia, as the 3 seed after falling to Bama in the SEC title game, will play Michigan in the other semi. Both games on New Year's Eve. Oklahoma has named a new head coach, and Clemson defensive coordinator Brent Venables, who worked as an assistant under Bob Stoops at OU from 1999 to 2011. Venables will replace Lincoln Riley, who departed for USC. And the Titans moved up to the 2 seed in the AFC after the Ravens lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday. Tonight, Monday Night Football is in Buffalo. The Bills host the Patriots, and a New England loss would shift the Titans back up to the 1 seed after the bye week. Kickoff is at 7:20. Catch the Westwood One coverage right here on The Zone. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
All right, let's see if I remember how to do this, shall we? Welcome back. Hope you had a fantastic weekend and a week off, a week apart from each other, but back and better than ever. Happy to be so. Here on 104.5 The Zone, Lucas Panzica. He's back behind the glass. He's pissed that I'm back. Tried to take over without me. It's funny because even a world away, I just happened to be coming back into my hotel room. A beautiful day trip to the spectacular pyramids of Giza and the Sphinx. And I sit down in my hotel room and I get a live notification. It's 104.5 The Zone. It's my show. I'm quote unquote on. So I click in. I want to check in on the boys. I haven't done anything sports related. The only tweets that I've put out on social media are the fact that I've left my AirPod a literal Atlantic Ocean away from me in the middle of a 22-hour or 3 flights combining for 22 hours. And I click in and I see Lucas and I see Will Bowling. And the conversation immediately starts about the fact that Lucas has less to do today. He can sit in the big chair. He can be excited. He doesn't have to mess with the poll questions. He doesn't have to do any of it, even though I saw you getting harassed about a lack of poll questions in my absence. And then all of a sudden, I'm excited for my guy. I know he's going to kill it. I know he did kill it. And many thanks to everybody who filled in for me while I was out. And the first words out of his mouth are basically, yeah, this is nice. I don't have to mess with any of it today. I hope he stays gone, basically, was to paraphrase your thought.
Allegedly.
So, allegedly, no, it was literally on my phone. Nothing changes.
These are unsubstantiated claims
about the internet just because I'm literally across the Atlantic Ocean watching you from an 8-hour time difference. Nothing about your words changed. YouTube doesn't change just because the language is different where I'm at. Shame on you, really.
I need to see if I remember how to do this, conversely.
Yeah, get back to it. It's going to be a rocky road. We're going to figure it out together. If you want to get involved, we welcome your participation. It would be lovely to hear all of your voices on the phone. 615-737-1045 is the number, 615-737-1045. Or you can interact with us on Zone TV as Ron Slay is in the chat. Well, look who's back finally. Welcome back, Buck. It's delightful to be back. But we have much time. I have 3 hours literally to get self-involved, and you know it's going to happen at some point, and we'll do a homeward bound segment, this one an international edition. But I want to talk sports. I haven't talked sports all week. I've been going crazy. I haven't had anything to tweet. It drives me insane. I log on, I want to do something, and I have nothing to contribute to the conversation, which is probably the case under normal circumstances. But at this point, I had not seen what happened in the week of sports other than to know that Brian Kelly now has a fake Louisiana accent, that he's being introduced at women's college basketball games. under these circumstances, it was laugh out loud funny to me to see that and all that happened with the coaching carousel while I was gone. But now we have the college football playoff, the Final Four. Number 1, Alabama. Number 2, Michigan. Number 3, Georgia. Number 4, the Bearcats of Cincinnati. And I got back in time on Saturday to watch almost all of the championship games. And, of course, the fact that Alabama, coming from behind in the second quarter, end up reasserting their dominance atop the world of college football, a surprise to no one, unless, of course, you're Lucas Panzica, who allegedly bet against Nick Saban.
Many did.
No, not many did.
I'm not alone.
No, this is as dumb. Wednesday we'll do the dumbest thing in sports, but I've got a few dumb. I've been off for a week. I got a few dumb things I want to get off my chest. If you bet against Nick Saban or Tom Brady, I'm sorry. It's not that you're an idiot. It's that you're displaying the behavior of an idiot. Like, I don't think any less of you, but also you're an idiot. What are you doing?
What am I doing?
What are you doing?
Everybody bet
6 points for Alabama?
Everybody liked 6 points.
Since when?
The
I leave for
entire
a week and the
conversation in the lead up to that
whole
game.
sports world loses their mind?
Find me one person other than Lee Corso who picked Alabama for that game.
I have feelings about Lee Corso because as the head coach of Indiana, he used to punt on third down. So my feelings about Lee Corso are different than everybody else's in the country. But on this, we are aligned. What the hell are you doing betting against Nick Saban as a 6-point underdog?
I'm an idiot for betting against Nick Saban, but so are thousands and thousands of other sports bettors.
I'm not letting them off
weekend.
the hook. They're just as dumb. What are you doing?
We give Lee Corso, people talk about him being a little old for game day. Maybe it's time to ride into the sunset. He was ahead of the game on everybody on this. We should all bow down to Lee Corso this weekend.
Tomahawk Chop on YouTube says it took Buck leaving the country for all to get right in the college football world. Indeed. And you know what Nick Saban is doing? Can we burn that audio right out of the gate? Because it's too good. I can't sit on it for a whole show, or at least for a full hour. Nick Saban, in the press conference after the fact, I'm sure many of you have seen this clip by now. The famous rat poison rant that he put out a couple of years ago about how everything in the media is rat poison and it's bad for us. And you kill our guys because they think more highly of themselves than they actually should. They get distracted, and they lose focus, and then we drop a game to Texas A&M. No. The rat poison this time, Nick Saban is drinking it with a bendable straw.
You guys gave us a lot of really positive rat poison. The rat poison that you usually give us is usually fatal. But the rat poison that you put out there this week was yummy.
Listen to the uncomfortable laughter as he makes eye contact with each of them. You, who wrote that we should be 6-point underdogs to Georgia. I'm Kirby Smart's daddy. Who the hell are you? Like, he's smiling in that clip, but he's very clearly surveying the room for all the media members that doubted the Crimson Tide in the SEC championship game. What are you shaking your head about?
It's a very satisfied smile, though.
But look at him surveying. Look at him looking around. He's making eye contact. I'm familiar with this tactic because I cover Mike Vrabel for a living, and I know what it's like to be death stared. Okay? Like, let's not play any games about press conference etiquette when you are the offending party in the press corps that day. I have been that person. It's an uncomfortable place to exist. It's exactly what Nick Saban is doing.
But he's not angry with the media. He's very pleased with the media. He's angry with the media when he's talking about the fatal rat poison that they've given him his entire career at Alabama. He's very pleased with what the media gave his football team this week.
Oh, God. He's just go ahead and crown him. Alabama's number one in the country all over again. All is right in the world. The universe has been realigned, and they leapfrogged Michigan to do it, which is about the only place that you can take issue at this point with the Final Four. As we mentioned, Alabama 1, Michigan 2, Georgia 3, and then Cincinnati rounding out the top 4 for the college football playoff. So you will see Alabama versus Cincinnati, and you'll see Michigan versus Georgia. When we come back, you're going to hear from Gary Barta, who is the College Football Playoff Committee chair, and the response that he gave in regards to whether they at all considered the fact that if they didn't jump Alabama to the top spot, that they would be facing an SEC championship game rematch in the college football playoff semifinal, which would be a television disaster as far as ratings are concerned. But they'd never consider that, would they? You'll hear from Gary Barta coming up next. Your phone calls as well. 615-737-1045. We are off and rolling on this Monday. You're on 1045 The Zone. little sauce time. Mark Jones, ABC on the call last night, or Saturday rather, with Robert Griffin III. The ACC championship game, one of the many college football championship games played over the weekend. One of the better played games. It's difficult to look at the final margin of victory for all these teams and say, well, clearly Pitt did not struggle at all with Wake Forest, which was not the case if you, in fact, watched that game and you saw the way that Wake Forest's defense, was doing a good job to derail Pitt for at least a half. And, of course, the Big Ten was rolled summarily by Michigan, send Iowa straight into the sun. If I never have to see another snap of Iowa football, it will be too soon. They are an embarrassment. Every time they get out in a game with stakes and they fall flat on their face this way. And I thought 14-3 was disappointing. And then you look at 42-3 in the second half, and you realize just how far away they are from actually competing. Of course, the story of the weekend was Nick Saban, Alabama. Bryce Young's Heisman moment? Question mark? Is this enough to put him ahead of Matt Corral? For this, I have looked at Bryce Young and the way that Alabama has been. I mean, is shaky a fair way to say it if you've only got one loss on the season? I don't want to characterize them unfairly because for all the reasons that I've just said that you shouldn't doubt Nick Saban coming into that game, and of course he emerges victorious against Kirby Smart. Georgia, with the best team in school history, still can't win the SEC, which is laugh out loud funny if you're a Tennessee fan. But I'm looking at, struggling against LSU, who admittedly was not anywhere close to competent this year, struggling against Florida, which we all saw crumbled very, very precipitously after themselves losing to Georgia and the way that things spiraled for them there. The A&M loss was uncharacteristic, not only because it was the first time that a former Nick Saban assistant had beaten Nick Saban, but because A&M at the time was without their starting quarterback and was an unranked team. That almost never happens, and certainly hasn't happened in quite some time. So to question Alabama, whether you want to look at the line pre-SEC championship game and say Nick Saban should never be a 6-point underdog in anything, no matter what it is that he's doing, no matter what it is that he's up against, I mean, I'm inclined to agree with you. But there were reasons to kind of poke and prod at the legitimacy of this particular Alabama team. But Bryce Young on Saturday, after they started trailing 10-0, and the way that admittedly there were some coverage busts by the Georgia defense, something that we have, again, not seen all season long, the way that he brought that team back, and really the way that that offensive line rebounded after getting just bullied by Auburn in the Iron Bowl a week ago, I thought that the win by Alabama, the performance by Bryce Young, and what it means for Nick Saban, I thought that was probably the most impressive championship game performance of the weekend. 615-737-1045 is how you jump in on the conversation. The question that I want to ask the audience is, which college football program did you believe had the best weekend? You could make the argument for Alabama, now leapfrogging Michigan in the top spot in the Final Four as announced by the College Football Playoff Committee yesterday. And Gary Barta's explanation, God love Reese Davis, who not only is just fuming with rage every time that Kendrick Perkins mispronounces Moses Moody's name.
Moses Moody.
It's my favorite part of that clip, just Reese Davis spitting Moses Moody. Kendrick Perkins, who just simply can't get over it. But he does a great job in pressing Gary Barta, who is the College Football Playoff Committee chair, in these television broadcasts after each ranking is announced. And so he did the same last night because there were people, myself included, that were curious to hear Gary Barta's explanation as to why Alabama, with one loss, leapfrogged Michigan after defeating Georgia. Completely legitimate arguments could be made, but I wanted to hear why Gary Barta and the College Football Playoff Committee made that decision as opposed to, basically what made sense to the rest of us, which Alabama just handled the best team in the country. This was Gary Barta yesterday.
The chair of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, Gary Barta, as he always does, joins us exclusively on Selection Day. Gary, there wasn't a lot of drama in terms of which teams were going to make the field. That seemed pretty clear-cut to us. But at the top, what separated Alabama and Michigan in the judgment of the committee?
Well, let's begin with the game that was played last night. Coming into the game, Georgia has been, they were undefeated. They've been ranked number one by the committee all along. And so not only did Alabama beat Georgia, but the way they beat them. They controlled the game pretty much from start to finish. So there's that. And when you add that to their body of work, there are other wins against Ole Miss, Arkansas, et cetera. But at the end of the day, now, Michigan, obviously a big win 2 weeks in a row now, looking great against Ohio State and then against Iowa. But at the end of the day, the complete victory over Georgia, the committee came out of there with a strong consensus that Alabama was 1 and Michigan was 2.
And there's no reason really to pull and poke and prod at that argument, because I think what we all saw on Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening was the best team in the country, beating what had been the best team in the country and doing it, I won't say with ease, against the best defense in college football that maybe I've ever seen in my lifetime. Certainly one of the most talented, with draftable prospects really across the board, now that we're getting closer and closer to when people start producing mock drafts and paying attention to mock drafts, things of this nature. As the regular season concludes and as we get closer to the postseason and in the pre-draft process in the NFL, what I think we saw was the best quarterback, or the best quarterbacking that we had seen to this point. I don't know that anybody has had a more impressive performance than Bryce Young did against the kind of competition that he was up against. I would put that next to any quarterbacking performance in college football this season, and there have been some impressive ones, just as we came back to break from that call from Mark Jones and Robert Griffin last night on Kenny Pickett's fake slide touchdown run. That I understand why people want it made illegal. If it happens against your team, you are going to be furious. But for the purposes of entertainment, was one of the best plays made yesterday, not named Baylor, in their goal line, or Saturday against Baylor in their goal line stand, which was also another spectacular ending to a college football championship game. But Bryce Young, this was the Heisman moment. As we mentioned, this was as good as he has looked all season long. It's been messy this year. It's been chaotic. He, of course, is not draft eligible, and so this makes for one of the weakest quarterback drafts that we will see in the coming months in 2022, where I think I don't have an argument against Kenny Pickett as quarterback 1 in this draft. And we'll have Michael Felder on from Stadium, and we'll have Trevor Sikkema on from Pro Football Focus in the next 2 hours to talk about this. Trevor was at the Big Ten championship game, and of course Felder is paid to watch and dissect with great importance all of these games and the players, the schemes, more importantly, to help educate us on what Nick Saban and Jim Harbaugh and the coordinators for these teams are doing from an X's and O's schematic standpoint. Bryce Young, in this moment, just played the position as well as we have seen it played all year, especially when you consider that he did it trailing 10-0 and starting 4 for 9. He went 13 of 18 for the rest of the day, 248 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had a couple of scrambles as well and a score on the ground. He had a fumble after the end. I think it was like a 15-yard run that he had. So if you want to nitpick the performance, all well and good. But the 55-yard touchdown that he threw to start the second half to Jamison Williams was the play that really, it felt like, changed the game, because Alabama felt like it could just almost, I don't want to say cruise, but Stetson Bennett, the 4th or the 5th or the 6th, or whichever Stetson Bennett is quarterbacking Georgia at this point. Look at the difference between what he looked like all season long, playing with a lead because he had the best defense in football, and what he looked like trailing in that game when he had to try and pull his team out. That was the deciding moment in that football game to me. It wasn't Stetson Bennett's fault that they lost that game, by no stretch of the imagination. But I think it was clear and obvious to everybody what the difference between certainly those two quarterbacks was. when you saw Stetson Bennett playing without the lead. 615-737-1045 is the number. Which college football program had the best weekend in the sport? Because I think you could make the argument from a lot of different people. I mean, Jim Harbaugh, for example, who goes from, 8 years at this point at Michigan. He's been there for a minute. And it's been discussed, would it make sense to come back to the NFL? He's been good. Like, it's not like he's been bad, but he hasn't been able to get over the game that decides you're a winner that year or not, which for Michigan is, of course, defeating Ohio State, which they did handily for the first time in Jim Harbaugh's career. So they stay at number 2 in the college football playoff, leapfrogged by Alabama, but they go from being unranked in the preseason to this moment now. And I thought Jim Harbaugh yesterday, when they interviewed him on the Final Four broadcast, I thought his insights on this were particularly telling about how far that they've come and how much this means, if for nothing else, the optic standpoint of what kind of coach Jim Harbaugh is.
Jim, when you think about going into the season unranked, you're the first team to make the playoff that was unranked in the preseason. There was some negativity surrounding the program. What's a moment, what's an anecdote in which you sense that there was a change, that there was a confidence, a belief in this group?
For me, just watching our guys give it their very best every day, whether we were in off-season, winter conditioning, whether we were in spring practice, weight room, fall practice, just a bunch of guys that wanted to give it their very best and then feel good about what they accomplished. And they've accomplished a lot. There's a lot of work. Guys just working and not worrying is what I would say. But, yeah, it's a great feeling. And Reese, I got to say, too, I mean, you're one of the only ones out there that thought we'd be any good at the beginning of the season. What did you see?
I thought you looked tough. You looked disciplined. I thought you could run the ball in the early part of the season. You didn't turn it over. And certainly the 2 defensive ends were terrific. So does that make me an analyst now on your staff?
Absolutely. No, you're one of the best. There's no question about it.
Jim Harbaugh, look, you think he was trying to catch Reese Davis in a moment? No way would that man ever be unprepared. Sit down, Jim Harbaugh. Question this man. I think that there's a lot to be said about the job that Jim Harbaugh has done this year and the way that they're doing it, because it's not like they're running for like 6 or 7 yards a clip. It's crazy. I mean, it's Big Ten football, which is mind-numbingly bad, and it made me because Mark Jones was great on the ACC game, and Robert Griffin III was, I thought, good as well. But there were moments when I don't know how I feel about Mark Jones as a football play-by-play guy. Like, I love him on the NBA. Love him. And he's a legend, of course. He's an icon. But there were some moments where I was like, all right, I'm not crazy about the commentary in the middle of this game. And, all right, Kenny Pickett's being held down a little bit in the first half. Let me switch over to the Big Ten championship game, and then it's 14-3. And I switch back, and I'm like, all right, enough of the ACC. Let me see what's going on in the Big Ten championship game. It's still 14-3. And then I finally decide after a third time of trying to give the Big Ten championship game a chance. I'm like, all right, enough of the Big Ten. And then they end up rolling them 42-3. I don't know what the hell happened, but I know that they weren't doing it through the air because they can run the way that the Michigan team has done all year long. They probably have the number 1 overall pick on defense in Aiden Hutchinson, the defensive end. So for all that, look at me just repeating Reese Davis's analysis. What happened there? I did not mean to do that at all. But you understand what I'm trying to say. Michigan has earned their spot, and it gives a little new blood. Now, I'm not crazy about the idea that we could see a final with an all-SEC title game. I know that doesn't bother people in our part of the world. I understand that SEC, it just means more, even though you hate each other, you're tribal during the season. But for some reason, come playoff time, everybody gets on the Bama bandwagon or the LSU bandwagon or Georgia bandwagon. Maybe not Tennessee. Maybe Tennessee's fans, their hatred runs too deep, and I don't think anybody enjoyed, outside of Alabama fans who actually won the championship, I don't think anybody enjoyed Georgia losing that way more than Tennessee fans did.
I think every Tennessee fan on the planet would do anything for a Cincinnati-Michigan national championship game.
It would be terrible ratings. Nobody wants to watch Cincinnati. I love that they're in. Nobody wants to watch you. Speaking of Cincinnati, you felt that they had the biggest weekend of all the college football championship games.
Absolutely. Not just because they won and covered against Houston in the American Championship game, because Cincinnati needed a lot of things to happen throughout the course of this season to be in this spot, and they happened. They needed Notre Dame to win out after winning in South Bend. That happened. They needed Baylor to win the Big 12 championship game so that there's not a discussion about Oklahoma State or Cincinnati for that last spot. That happened. Everything they needed to fall into place besides going undefeated happened for Cincinnati. Now they're on the big stage. It's what the group of five has been clamoring for a long time, so I can't wait to see how they do against this Alabama offensive line and this high-powered offense with Bryce Young.
I'm so not excited for the lazy analysis of, look, they don't belong after they get smoked.
Right.
Like, I don't think anybody who's going to look at this for the same reasons that Notre Dame has this hanging over their head every time that they get in, or Oklahoma, or the year that Washington was in it, or anybody who's the fourth seed in this playoff, because we know even in expansion, even whether you're talking about expanding to 8 teams or 12 teams being the most likely scenario, even if they did 16, just to keep as much attention from as many different programs and fan bases as late in the year as possible, you know what the outcome's going to be. You know that it's going to be Alabama and the second best SEC team, or Ohio State, or maybe Clemson if they get out of this down bad year, which, by the way, they look better at the end of the year.
They're winners because Clemson didn't go undefeated, right? Yeah. They're winners because all the debate was removed. We knew who the 4 teams were after Conference Championship Saturday.
It just pisses me off that they put him out in the first one. When Gary Barta trots out there and Reese Davis is interviewing him for the first time, and Cincinnati's sitting there at 6. No, Gary, you cannot tell them that they can win all of their games and not make the Final Four. That's why I hate this thing. It may be the best version, whether you like the BCS, whether you hated the BCS, whatever. The College Football Playoff Committee at this point, I think, is the best that we're going to do, even as subjective as it might be. Now, I missed all of the coaching carousel stuff last week. I know that's basically that's sports porn for you.
It was so much fun.
God, I mean, you look like you need a cigarette, like you look post-coital back there. You have a glow.
I do have a glow. The Brian Kelly Southern accent thing carried us for like 3 days. That was incredible.
I'm so mad. That's the stuff I live for. I don't care about any of this other. I want to hear Brian Kelly. Do we have any audio of that? Just for my purposes, maybe if you find it at some point. In the meantime, I'll talk about something else that's going on with the coaching carousel because I put Lucas on the spot. But it was reported yesterday, I believe, by Mike Ryan of Meadowlark Media that Mario Cristobal was going to be the next head coach of the Miami Hurricanes. Now, this was another job that we had discussed as not being open, but Manny Diaz needing to move on or needing to be moved on from. But Matt Zenitz of On3 Sports has just confirmed, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing Matt's last name incorrectly, that Mario Cristobal has confirmed in a meeting with Oregon players that he's leaving for Miami, a source tells On3 Sports. So Manny Diaz was fired this morning. It was in true Miami fashion, Banana Republic style, the way that they basically agreed to terms with Mario Cristobal before actually letting Manny Diaz know that he had been fired. I believe that was just put out this morning, that Manny Diaz had officially been fired, right, by Yahoo Sports. I think Pete Thamel had it.
Yes. No, and he'd been on the recruiting trail all weekend.
What this is so trash. Do we have Brian Kelly's fake accent before we do some homeward bound stuff? I want to laugh. I want to end this segment with a laugh. Do you have it for me?
It's a great night to be a Tiger. I'm here with my family, and we are so excited to be in the great state of Louisiana. But more.
What happened there? Did somebody pull him with a hook?
It's an abbreviated version.
Okay, it's an abbreviated. The way that he says family. It sounds like when I do that read that drives me insane. That I like hiccup in the middle of it and I can hear it and it drives me crazy. And I don't know if this is too inside baseball. Lucas knows what I'm talking about. It sounds like he hiccuped in the middle of saying family when he tried to force that fake Southern accent out here.
I said last week, it sounds like an independent presidential candidate nobody knows about doing a rally in Louisiana.
Family. All right. Very good, Brian Kelly.
His dad's a politician. So.
Well, which makes sense because he's an absolute fraud. Maybe I'll have some smoke for Brian Kelly later in the week. When we come back, though, should we do a Homeward Bound? Is it time? An international version of Homeward Bound. Lucas has the music. My travels and trepidations from the United States to Egypt were insane, and on the way back, a little less chaotic, but well worth it. And we haven't talked about the trip yet. I feel like we should let people know. We'll do that coming up next before we pivot back to some Titans talk coming off the bye week. Of course, you'll hear from Mike Vrabel at 11:45. I'm Buck Reising, and this is 104.5 The Zone. This makes me very happy. So, if you're unaware, welcome back, by the way. Buck Reising here with you until 1 o'clock. I went to Egypt on the bye week. I've literally brought half the Sahara Desert back in my shoes because we went to the pyramids for a day. Went to see my family, my dad's entire side of the family. We'll do more sports stuff in a second. You got time. We got time. Let's get a little self-involved in the meantime. Now, leave it up just for a minute, just for a little. I miss it.
Latest addition to the Buck Reising Show podcast?
Oh, my
or playlist?
Yes, this should be on the playlist. This makes me very happy. I love this music. Amr Diab. I'm sure I mispronounced that horrifically.
You're still feeling it, right?
Oh, 100%.
I know the feeling. Like when I come home from my family in Brazil or something, I know the same feeling. I just want to listen to samba for the 2 weeks that I'm back.
Oh my God. I love the drums. I love the singing. I love the language. I love it all. Makes me very happy. So I was only in Egypt though for 2 days, which is why we need to do another edition. Is this part 3 of Homeward Bound? How many are we on at this point from all of my mishaps and misadventures in traveling back from Titans games? Except this had nothing to do with the Titans other than the fact that they had the week off, so I took the week off. So let's do it. Homeward Bound edition number 3, the international version. Lucas will get the music, and we will set the scene momentarily, and I'll tell you about my trials and travails in trying to get halfway across the world. So we start, do we start with the New England trip? Are we going back too far? I feel like we already, well, that was part 2.
We already did that. Yeah, that was part 2.
All right, let me shut up. Lebowski says, Homeward Bound 3. Somebody just chipped these damn dogs already. We'll save that for the pandemic version. So we get back from Boston. Of course, you understand my issues with getting back from Boston and the fact that I almost didn't get a return flight back till March. We leave this behind us. We get home. We do the show. My flight from Nashville to Houston, from Houston to Frankfurt, Germany, from Frankfurt, Germany to Cairo. It gets delayed, so I got some time to sleep. I have time. The delay may be not the best thing in the world. Maybe I'm going to have to catch another flight or figure it out, but it's just in the meantime, I'm exhausted. I need sleep. So I get on the plane. The plane, instead of going to Houston, is going from Nashville to Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. So I get to D.C. D.C. is where the big flight takes place. It's 9 hours from Washington, D.C. to Frankfurt, Germany. And once I get to Frankfurt, Germany, I know that I'm going to need all of my documentation, all my vaccine paperwork, all of my proof of a negative test within 48 hours because traveling abroad is a nightmare under normal circumstances. But in a global pandemic, it is nothing short of disastrous, as evidenced by my trip to Germany this time. So, I get to Germany. I've got about an hour before I have to catch my last flight. This is 20 hours of flying that I'm participating in at this point. And I get to the counter. I've waited in line. I've been at my gate in more than enough time. I've even shopped at duty free. I brought home all kinds of gifts for Lucas and everybody here at the Zone and a lot of my friends and family, and I've left them all at home, so Lucas gets no presents today. But I get all this, and I get to the counter, and we're boarding the plane. And the German flight attendant at Lufthansa, he says, paperwork, please. I say, all right, here we go. I got everything. I got the vaccine. I got the vaccine card. I got my passport. I got my proof of a negative test. I have the documentation that is going to require me to get into Egypt. I've got my German visa. I've got my Egyptian visa. Baby, I'm killing it. We're in good shape. Until this German flight attendant, or gate worker, for lack of a better term, he looks at my paper and he says, you have the incorrect, I'm not going to do an offensive German accent because I feel like that would be misplaced. But he says, you have the incorrect test. You cannot get on this plane. Well, sir, what do you mean? I have nowhere to go. I'm stranded in Frankfurt, Germany. What do you mean I can't get on this plane? There's no other flights to Egypt on Monday afternoon. At this point, Tuesday morning or whatever the hell time zone I'm in. I have to, what's the Tom Hanks movie, Lucas? You can interject in the middle of this. Perhaps you'll have to look it up, where he sleeps in the airport. He's living in the airport terminal. I think it's called the terminal or something stupid like that. Anyway, this was going to be me. I was going to have to sleep internationally in an airport in Frankfurt, Germany, because one, the Germans wouldn't let me out of the country, but the second part is they didn't want to let me into the country. They didn't want to let me in past customs, past passport security, to go stay at a hotel across the street from the airport. They didn't want to let me into Germany. So we finally get it straightened out. I get on a flight the next day. I'm going to bunk at the Marriott across the street, and God help me if the Germans don't let me back in the airport, because we're going to have an international crisis on our hands. But finally, after a full day later, I get on the flight, 4.5 hours, Frankfurt to Cairo. I have to get a $300 PCR test in the German airport. And let me tell you, if you think the swabbing here is unpleasant, the Germans are not kind with their swabbing of the nose. I think I still have a piece of the swab stuck in the back of my brain. Have I gone too long for the music? Can we not play the music again? Don't look at me don't shake your head at me like that. We're doing live radio. Help me help you. So, there we are. We're back. We're in the mood. Theater of the mind, Lucas. Damn it.
How many of these are you going to cycle through?
I don't know.
Oh, you've never slept in an airport terminal before?
Not in a different country. No, I haven't. Without Euro at my disposal, without, any kind of, I've basically still got my luggage from Boston because the Titans played in New England the weekend before. I haven't had time to change out my stuff, so I don't have anything. I even have to go buy a different kind of charger because they don't use the same kind of plugins that we do here in the States. I don't even have a way to charge my phone and my laptop. But we finally get to Cairo. We spend 2 days in Cairo. And 22 hours of airports and planes later, we're back. And this neglects to mention the trip to the pyramids or the time that I spent in some of the great palaces, some of the most historic and influential worldwide things that you could ever see. There's no place like Egypt in the world. And it's my second home, and I love it there, but I'm happy to be home. And that concludes Homeward Bound 3 International Edition. How many cycles of the music did I make it through?
1.5.
See, that's back off. What are you after me? It's a long trip. It's literally a week worth of trip. You're gonna get after me with how long I'm taking. You're giving me the hook.
How long's the flight?
I just told you, 22 hours. Well, there's no one flight. There's 3 flights.
But the overseas flight, how long was that one?
The big one is 9.
Did you watch anything?
I did actually. I watched Ted Lasso. I watched Brother Bear, which is a Disney movie. I don't know why I felt the urge to watch it. You know what I'm talking about? I feel like it was like I was like 5 years old when I saw Brother Bear.
Yeah, you probably had a ton of options.
I had many options. I watched 1917, which made me immediately depressed.
Great movie.
Great movie. Fantastic movie.
How'd you like Ted Lasso?
I enjoyed Ted Lasso very much. It made me feel less, or like I need to be less of a bad person on a day-to-day basis, which is all well and good when Lucas tells me that. But when Ted Lasso tells me that, it's a little different. It's a little more uplifting. I take it to heart more seriously.
That show is making this world a better place one episode at a time.
Well, the world is currently on fire in a great many ways, so perhaps Ted Lasso will have some more legwork to do. Oh, goodness. Oh, we've been informed by our friend Lebowski from Football and Other F Words that our show has hit the big leagues because the porn spam has invaded the YouTube chat, Lucas. I don't know if you're made aware of this or not, but we have that going on. And when we come back, we'll talk about the other spam, the NFL season, because the Titans are back off the bye and they need to limp across the finish line. We're going to tell you how they're going to do it, who may be back, and we're also going to be joined by our buddy Michael Felder of Stadium to talk about the college football games that were and who has the best chance at the national championship title this year. All that coming up next. I'm Buck Reising, and this is 104.5 The Zone.
It is 11 a.m. Good morning. I'm Lucas Panzica. The coaching carousel continues to spin. Multiple reports stating Miami has fired Manny Diaz and will be hiring Mario Cristobal out of Oregon, who has reportedly told his team he is leaving for the Hurricanes. Also, Tennessee going bowling in Music City. The Vols will play Purdue in the TransPerfect Music City Bowl in Nissan Stadium December 30th. We learned in the College Football Playoff Selection Show on Sunday. And after championship weekend, Alabama took the 1 seed in the College Football Playoff. They will play Cincinnati in the semifinals, while Georgia, as the 3 seed, after losing to Bama in the SEC title game, will take on Michigan in the other semifinal. Both games on New Year's Eve. Oklahoma has named a new head coach and Clemson defensive coordinator Brent Venables. He worked as an assistant under Bob Stoops at OU from 1999 to 2011. And the Titans moved up to the 2 seed in the AFC after the Ravens lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers Sunday. Tonight, Monday Night Football is an opportunity for the Titans to reclaim the 1 seed. In Buffalo, they host the Patriots. A Bills win would move the Titans back to the top of the conference. Kickoff is at 7:20. Catch the Westwood One coverage right here on The Zone. For all your foundation repair and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Hour number 2 on this Monday. Hope you had a fantastic weekend. Hope you're feeling right, living well. Got a lot of stuff to discuss over the remainder of the show. Remember that our buddy Michael Felder of Stadium is going to be here coming up next. We're going to talk about the X's and O's from College Football Championship weekend. Mike Vrabel, he's going to speak to the media at 11:45. So you want to hear from the Titans head coach about where they are, where they stand after the bye week, some much-needed time off. Then you can hear that right here on The Zone. Lucas Panzica's back there making it happen. His compatriot today, if you're watching on Zone TV, is Mac. I was not informed of Mac's last name, Lucas. Mac Morey? That can't be real. If you want to get involved, 615-737-1045 is the number, 615-737-1045. Mac Morey sounds like a name that was made up for Sports Talk Radio.
Is that a stage name or is that your real name?
My real name's Maliki.
Maliki.
All right, so I nailed it. Maliki, that's interesting. Anyway, we will talk about the Titans, or you'll hear from Titans head coach Mike Vrabel later, as I mentioned, but I want to start this hour with somebody I'm very interested. I'm now invested in the Titans drafting and where the Titans should head or what they need to address. I don't know why I'm like this, because it's still week 14, or will be, after the Patriots and the Bills play tonight. It's only week 14 of the NFL season. There's still 5 weeks left to go, and already I'm peaking at mock drafts. I shouldn't be. It's a disease. It's a plague. But it's infesting my timeline because we have so many friends who do great work in the sports media sphere, and a lot of great people like Trevor Sikkema, who will join us at 12:20, who do talent evaluation, who do scouting in the pre-draft process. And we have, over this weekend, so many great players for great teams competing in championship games that are going to be highlighted, even though they've been good or great in some cases throughout the course of the college football season. More attention is going to be attracted to them in championship weekend because there's just fewer games for you to consume. So in this instance, I am watching the SEC championship game on Saturday night. I'm fresh off the plane. In fact, I'm watching most of the first half on the last leg of my flight home from Cairo because they have, fortunately, live TV on the airplane. So I'm watching the first half, and I'm hugely impressed with Bryce Young, and I'm curious about what is going wrong for the Georgia defense in ways that we haven't seen it go wrong all year. I'm fascinated by the fact that they simply can't pressure for the first time. They can't pressure a quarterback all year long. Georgia couldn't, and an exceptional job done by the offensive line of Alabama. And then my attention turns to one of Georgia's playmakers on offense, because they did do their best to try and get back in that game, but Stetson Bennett, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, wasn't simply good enough to bring them back in that game, as we've talked about. He looks much different when playing with a lead that the Georgia defense gives him, as they had almost all season long after he took the job over from JT Daniels, than he did when trying to bring his team back. But the thing that keeps catching my attention, the thing that jumps off the screen and makes me see somebody who I knew had the ability to play on Sundays, but now who I want to play on Sundays, Thursdays, or Mondays in Nashville, Tennessee. I am in love with Georgia tight end Brock Bowers. I think that they so desperately need a playmaker at that position, as evidenced by Ryan Tannehill's struggles and the lack of a safety net, that you desperately need an improved tight end position come draft time. Now, maybe this is just an observation that doesn't need to be made, doesn't need to be legitimately picked apart or discussed right now, because there's still games to be played. The Titans are in good position, as we'll talk about later on in the show, and you'll hear from Mike Vrabel on, given the fact that they went up from the 3 seed to the 2 seed with the Ravens loss. And, of course, if the Patriots are to lose on the road to Buffalo, the Titans can once again be the top dog in the AFC. It's all great news. So maybe my pre-draft looking ahead is premature, but I can't stop thinking about the fact that there's so many places on this roster that they need to get addressed outside of just getting healthy throughout this bye week, and the fact that Brock Bowers was consistently making plays in this process. I think that at some point he will need to be a player that is considered for the Tennessee Titans. Now, I think at this point, I feel like I've just done a Chris Olave segment, Lucas. I feel like I've just done analysis on somebody who's not draft eligible. I thought Brock Bowers was a junior. Am I wrong? Is he a freshman? Did I botch that? He's looking this up. This is going to be so embarrassing if I've just done 9 minutes on a player who's not even eligible for the draft this year. It would be funny. It would be great content. But I feel like I thought Brock Bowers was eligible to come out. Am I incorrect in that?
You are incorrect. He is class of 2021 out of high school.
He's a freshman?
He's a freshman.
That's disgusting.
Number 3 tight end in the country out of Napa, California.
I'm pissed. I did that whole segment on Brock Bowers, and he's not even eligible to come out yet. That sounds about right. Let's talk about quarterback 1. In the meantime, Mac or Malachi or Malachi, or forgive me, Mac, I don't mean to butcher your name, but he's laughing at me. This is what you should not be if you're aspiring to career in professional broadcast. Because I swear to God, I saw he was a junior on my Draft Network profile that I have up of him. Of course, he's a freshman. Either way,
he looks like a junior.
He's a monster, man. That touchdown play that he had, where he's breaking tackles left and right, that screamed Titans to me because of yards after contact, how much you're able to do after you make the catch or you have the ball in your hands. That was so much fun to watch, even as they didn't really have a chance in that game. All right, I'll wait for Brock Bowers. You should too. Two-tone blue should be the goal for that guy, assuming that he stays healthy. But quarterback 1, I think, is interesting, an interesting conversation at this point, because Bryce Young, we know, is not eligible to come out as a part of this year's draft class, but we know the draft class in college football is not ideal as far as quarterback is concerned. In fact, if you're looking at this point, it's Kenny Pickett at Pittsburgh, it is Matt Corral at Ole Miss, and it is Sam Howell at North Carolina. Are we still having that conversation? Should we be? I mean, they had struggles at North Carolina this season, and I don't know how much to pin on Sam Howell, if that's a fair assessment, but what I saw of him this year was not good enough. Certainly not good enough to be a first-round pick, but, I mean, who else is there? Spencer Rattler got benched. That was supposed to be the first overall pick. Now it looks like it's going to be Aiden Hutchinson out of Michigan. It can't be the quarterback for Cincinnati, can it? I don't think that he is good enough.
Ritter?
Desmond Ritter is not good enough to be as a part of this conversation at this point. We'll talk to Mike Felder about this, because Mike studies the X's and O's in college much more deeply than just about everybody. You have Malik Willis at Liberty as well, who is an interesting conversation. And Liberty, at this point, they did Liberty and the situation with Hugh Freeze. Who's the Tennessee quarterback transfer that didn't do anything, obviously?
Oh, Caden Salter?
Yeah, Caden Salter. Were you tracking him much at all? I don't know how invested you were after he got kicked off campus.
No, he's at Liberty behind Malik Willis.
But
I don't know if he's gotten any snaps.
And he wasn't good enough, obviously, to supplant Malik Willis. Malik Willis is a legitimate talent. So some considerations to be made. Tomahawk Chop brings up Matt Corral. I believe I mentioned him, but if I didn't, he's probably the only other competition for Heisman at this point for Bryce Young. Now, maybe you could make the argument for a couple of other players. I think that I would have loved to see Jordan Davis, the defensive tackle at Georgia, get some consideration for the Heisman. Of course, that's not going to be a legitimate conversation that's had. And honestly, he looked pretty mortal against that Alabama offensive line. He had a great first quarter, and then after that, you just didn't see much from him, which was surprising to me. But who is quarterback one at this point? Because I'm having trouble not settling on Kenny Pickett, even though I know Matt Corral to be a hugely talented runner. I've seen what Lane Kiffin has done with him in that offense. I think Kenny Pickett is good within that Pittsburgh scheme as well and does have the ability to maneuver. I don't think it's essential if you're going to be a draftable NFL quarterback, but it does make a big difference unless you're going to be pinpoint accurate. In fact, I think that's one of the things that's kind of derailed guys like Tua. But Bama's offensive line may have been the biggest surprise of this weekend in college football, from how bad they looked against Auburn to how much better they played in the SEC championship game. But neither of these quarterbacks, whether it be Pittsburgh or Ole Miss winning 10 games for the first time, getting Lane Kiffin a contract extension. Maybe I should call him Lane Contract. With all the conversations being had about Lane Kiffin across the country for different jobs, I think, though, from an accuracy standpoint, from a processing and elimination standpoint, from just where they are in the progression of their careers at that position, I don't think that Kenny Pickett can be debated as the best quarterback or not being the best quarterback in this draft class. I think that he is. I think there's a large enough sample size. And I think it's funny. Tennessee fans are probably listening to this, shaking their fist, because their out-of-conference game this year was Pitt, who ended up winning the ACC. And, of course, the games that you're able to play in from a non-conference perspective were for Pittsburgh something that obviously you had a chance to win if you had a different quarterback at the time between Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton. But, of course, rolling up cupcakes like South Alabama and Bowling Green were not going to give you the strength of schedule that you required. And if you'd have beaten Pittsburgh, we'd have been having a much different conversation about the University of Tennessee today. I think ultimately you got to be pretty happy about. We'll talk more about the Music City Bowl in Tennessee and Purdue later in the week. And as that game gets closer, of course, they'll be in Nashville, which we haven't talked about just yet. But I have to think that Tennessee fans are pissed watching that ACC championship game, knowing that they had a shot to take down Pittsburgh, and the fact that that was who their out-of-conference schedule game, their big one, was this year. When we come back, we'll talk with our buddy Mike Felder of Stadium. We will diagnose what happened in each of these championship games, at least in the Power Five, and probably Cincinnati as well, given that they will be in the Final Four for the college football playoff. Our guy Mike joins us coming up next. We'll make us smarter about the schematics of the sport. On the other side, I'm Buck Reising, and this is 104.5 The Zone. Do you really want to go through another year with that awful joint pain? I'm telling you, don't do it. Resolve right now to get yourself moving again for 2022. Hey, it's Buck Reising. It's time to call QC Kinetics, non-surgical regenerative treatments for joint pain. We're talking lasting results using natural biologics. No surgery, no pain meds, no steroids, and no downtime. It's really exciting stuff. Regenerative, restorative treatments that actually encourage your body to heal itself using highly concentrated natural biologics. The patients rave about it, and you can check out the testimonials on their Instagram at QC Kinetics. For hip pain relief, knee pain relief, shoulder and back pain relief, don't let them keep giving you steroids, and don't let them tell you surgery is your only option. Get a free second opinion at QC Kinetics. Do it now, I'm telling you. And imagine life in 2022 without pain. Call the local medical professionals at QC Kinetics, 615-249-4024. That's 615-249-4024. All right. A lot of news. Titans just put out a release among many different designations. Julio Jones has been designated to return from injured reserve. That is great news. That is exactly what you were hoping for when you shut him down a couple of weeks ago. It's not the only thing that has happened. Our buddy Mike Felder of Stadium is going to join us, and we'll talk college football here in just a second. But what is happening right now, Tuzar Skipper, an outside linebacker, has been brought back to the practice squad. Obviously, Julio Jones has not been cleared off of IR, but he has been designated to return to practice, as have Racey McMath, who you have not heard from in quite some time, and Dane Cruikshank at safety. John Simon has been released from the active roster, which means that somebody is coming up to the active roster at some point. They're clearing room for a transaction to be made, and then restored to the practice squad from the COVID-19. Wait, what is this? The practice squad reserve COVID-19 list. There's too many injury designations in the NFL. Tight end Austin Fort. But the big news is that Julio Jones has been cleared to return from practice. That just breaking right now, courtesy of Titans PR. So keep that in mind before Mike Vrabel speaks at 11:45. In the meantime, we'll get smarter about college football. Michael Felder of Stadium is here with us now. Mike, I hope you're well. I hope you had a lovely holiday and that you've enjoyed the championship games as much as we did.
Yeah, I did, man. And for me, I just want to say props to Utah, Utah State, UTSA, Northern Illinois, Louisiana, Cincinnati, Pitt, Baylor, Michigan, Bama. Winning a conference championship is hard. And I know we're going to talk playoff, but I just want to give those teams their propers for winning a conference title. It's hard. It's hard to get to play for a title, let alone win it.
No, I refuse to have you on and not talk about Utah kicking Oregon's ass again this year. Why does Utah only exist for this purpose, Mike? Because I wasn't surprised by it. In fact, when we figured that would be the Pac-12 championship game, that was the worst possible case scenario for the style of play that these two teams have. And to send Mario Cristobal out that way has to feel particularly satisfying for Kyle Whittingham.
It's got to feel satisfying, and it's one of those things where one team is a tough guy and the other team pretends to be tough. Like when they beat Ohio State, we all talked about, oh, this is a team. They're tougher in the trenches now. They're developing that O-line personality. And then Utah was like, you want to see what an O-line personality really looks like? Well, I'll show you. Woo! And they just beat their brains in. And it was one of those things. I was doing a show with my guy Stephen Hartzell, and he said, well, it's a neutral site, so it's not in Salt Lake City. And I said, well, how many points is that worth? Because they won by 31 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago at this point. They won by 31. So how many points is it worth? Is it worth 31 points to play in Las Vegas instead of in Salt Lake City? No. And it ultimately ended up being worth 3 points? That's the difference in the game. They did the same thing to them that they did in Salt Lake City. They did it to them in Vegas. And if you're Oregon, and obviously Oregon's got their own can of worms that they've got to figure out right now anyways, but you got to realize that, oh, that's not tough enough. And you got to figure out what it takes to get that job done, because if you can't beat Utah consistently, then you can't go to the playoffs.
I'm looking at this, Mike, because not tough enough is, I feel like most people hearing that analysis from you would associate Mario Cristobal coach teams with a certain kind of toughness. And it's not just because they lost one game or two games, I guess, the way that they did to Utah, that we should view them that much worse. But why is Mario Cristobal being heralded? Is there something that you're seeing on the field outside of the fact that they've just restored Oregon under him to being competent again? Is there something that stands out about Mario Cristobal coach teams that have had him basically in the running for a lot of these big jobs, least of which Miami, which he'll end up going to after that Banana Republic voting process apparently that they've had down there?
It's been a nightmare. Oh. To come through Saturday and Sunday and be like, Cristobal's going to take the job. He has until noon to accept the job. And I was like, but they didn't fire that guy. They just fired Manny Diaz, an hour ago?
Yeah, this morning. On my drive in, they fired Manny Diaz.
So it's just, to me, when I look at it with Mario Cristobal on the field, I think that there is a level of toughness and there's a level of competency that his offensive line brings to the table. I'm still curious about what his offense or what he wants an offense to look like, because with Tyler Shuck, it looked different than it looks with Anthony Brown. And with Anthony Brown, they still don't know. It seems like they don't know what they want to do outside of being able to run the football, whether it was Verdell or it's Dye or whoever it is. They want to run the football. We know that part of it, but we don't know what the rest of that picture looks like. So it'll be interesting to see, does he bring Moorhead with him to Miami? I think that there's this combination of his ability to recruit, which is truly amazing. He's really good at it, and he wants to be in those battles. I think that's the difference between him and someone like Chris Peterson, right? When Chris Peterson was at Washington, he didn't want to get into those battles. He kind of begrudgingly got into them because he had to upgrade his talent level if he wanted to win at a high level. Mario Cristobal wants to be in those battles, and that's something you probably get with whether it's working in the South, working in Florida, but also working under Nick Saban. You can't work for Saban if you're not going to be engaging in these battles. So I think that's a big positive. But it's one of those things. Everybody's trying to catch this lightning, right? Everybody wants to catch who's the next guy, or who's the guy that can help us contend. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes itself out. I personally, I think it's fine. I don't know what he's going to do that's that different than Manning Diaz. So we'll get a chance to watch it because I know he's the new guy at Miami. And then so does he bring Joe Moorhead? What does this look like? What does this team have in the coffers to make things go? Because they've had a lot of guys, they've lost a bunch of guys to transfer.
It makes me angry for all of my friends who are Miami fans. Every time I look at something like, the 247 composite rankings and to see them with the 13th best recruiting class or something like that last season, and to see the way that they floundered. But a conversation for a different day. Michael Felder, our guest.
Here's the other thing, Buck, though. The biggest issue I have from a recruit, I've got friends that work at 24/7. I got friends that work at Rivals. I got friends that have done this for a long time. Friends that are analysts, friends that do the ratings. But the big thing for me, there's an undervaluation. There's an undervalue and an under-evaluation of line talent. And line talent is the part that separates teams. And that's the part that's going to be interesting for me.
Well, let's talk about some line talent then, because I thought that was the biggest, maybe not the biggest deciding factor in the SEC championship game, Mike, but my God, did Alabama's offensive line look totally different in that championship game in Atlanta on Saturday than they did against Auburn a week ago. What did you see from Alabama, and just how big a difference did that offensive line make in what was is being discussed as a Heisman Trophy performance from Bryce Young?
Well, I think there's a couple different things, right? So there's layers. I think, one, you go back to the Arkansas, the first 3 drives. You go to Auburn the entire game. Both of those teams brought pressure, right?
Yeah.
They brought exotic blitzes. They brought pressure, and that overwhelmed Alabama's offensive line. And they looked like crap, quite frankly. And that got Bryce Young on the move. And so Georgia's not a blitzing team. They're not a pressure team. They're a team that runs green dogs, which is if you max protect, we'll add a linebacker to the mix. But they don't run a lot of pressures, not nearly as many pressures as the way that Auburn does. And they also don't have the corners in the secondary that's able to play one-on-one with you. And so the big thing that I noticed out of this football game, and I'm sure other people have talked about this as well, but going into this game, nobody could stop talking about Jordan Davis, right? And Jordan Davis is the man, and Jordan Davis, and we love Jordan Davis and Jordan Davis. That second touchdown, if you watch that drive, a light bulb goes off in Bill O'Brien's head, in Nick Saban's head. When they get Jordan Davis in the game with 11 personnel, they said, you know what? We will not substitute anymore. We are going to go tempo. We're going to keep his big behind in the football game for this entire drive, and let's see what happens. And on the touchdown play, you can see Jordan Davis pick his hand up off the ground, put his arms on number 70, I believe, for Alabama, and then just kind of chop his feet a little bit. No pass rush, no energy, no drive, no movement, and that makes it easier for Alabama. Once those guys get tired, they can't do anything. Specifically, once their biggest guy gets tired, now you can run because he's not moving side to side anymore on you. They threw a touchdown pass on that play, but the reality was, and what they did was they made Kirby Smart have to stop and think about when he puts number 99 in the game. And I thought that was a big benefit to Alabama's offensive line. I will say that Devonta Wyatt, number 95 for Georgia, to me, he came out looking like the best defensive line player on either side of the football, for either team. He was a guy that said, you know what, I know that I weigh 315 pounds, but I'm going to get on the hop and I'm going to do whatever I can to help my team win. It just everybody else didn't come with him. And I think the game plan was really sound for Alabama. I'm very curious to see what the game plan looks like on January, 10th, when they play Georgia again probably. But the reality for me was offensive line was good. but they helped that offensive line out, just like with Michigan and Ohio State, where they used misdirection to get Ohio State on their heels to eliminate penetration. With Alabama versus Georgia, what they did was create a tempo and an atmosphere that Georgia couldn't run with. And because they couldn't do that, they ran away from strength multiple times. They ran away from strength. They used motion to create angles, and they did a bunch of things that created positive they created an atmosphere of positivity, or created an element of easier positive results for their offensive line. So it wasn't really destruction, right? They didn't manhandle Georgia. What they did was make it so that Georgia wasn't in position, and it's a lot easier to knock a guy down when he's standing on one foot trying to move sideways than it is to knock him down when he's squared up to you.
Well, and it's in Michael Felder of Stadium, our guest, at In the Bleachers is where you can follow him. We're talking about championship weekend and the college football that was. It's an indictment as much of the coaching staffs that have gone against Kirby Smart and that Georgia defense with Dan Lanning, because nobody else seemed able or willing to make those adjustments to make, as you said, Kirby Smart have to think about it in a way that Bill O'Brien and Nick Saban clearly identified and took advantage of.
I think willing is a good point. And this is something that I've been frustrated with over the course of this season, where people just decided it's better to lay down and let Georgia beat the hell out of you than it is to challenge them. Huh. And that's been frustrating. It's been frustrating as a media personality to do not your spot, but like multiple times I've done, whether it's a podcast or a radio spot, and they're like, well, you can't do anything against Georgia. So what are you going to do? And I'm like, no. Have you seen football ever? Have you watched a game? You have to challenge them. If you think the best thing that you can do is try to play keep away and win this game 17-10, then you're an idiot. But there's a lot of idiots out there.
That's why we appreciate not being lumped in with the idiots, with the uninitiated. Michael Felder, always here to make us smarter about the sport of college football. And it's so incumbent. This is why I get so frustrated with somebody like Urban Meyer, right, who spends so much time in the college football ranks being smarter than everybody else. It's so much easier to be smarter than everybody else when your third-string quarterback is capable of winning a national championship, and you just simply don't have to make adjustments because teams aren't willing or able, more likely willing, to take the time to adjust to you. And then Urban comes to the pros and looks the way that he does because it's not that simple.
Yep. Yeah, it's frustrating, and it's very like the idea of not challenging Georgia is silly to me. The idea that like their corners aren't that good. Their safeties are good coming down. They're not great going backwards. And Alabama exposed all those things. Can Michigan do anything with that information? Probably not.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens. I'm actually getting in. I'm finishing up my Michigan rewatch, and then I'm going to get into the Georgia rewatch because I want to chart these Davis plays because I want to see how often he was in the game because he seemed to be on the sidelines a lot.
Yeah. No, they found ways to take one of the best defensive players in the country out of the game, and it was what made Alabama have, among other things, what gave Alabama the ability to have success. So in this Big Ten game, and of course you'll go back and watch Michigan, but you know what Michigan is. You know the way that they like to run the football and how little they are relying actually on their passing game. I hate Iowa. I hate everything about Iowa. I want Iowa defunded from any championship games moving forward or any really game of impact moving forward because they always do this, Mike, and it drives me insane. With Michigan and Georgia, though, because, of course, this will be the matchup in the college football playoff semifinal, there is nothing to me, and it sounds like your assessment is going to be the same, and unless you see something on film later today that changes your mind, it doesn't seem like what Michigan likes to do or is comfortable doing is not going to play into the strengths of the Georgia defense.
Yeah, this is going to be. I think this could be that 17-10 game that we referenced before, right?
Yeah.
Where it's one team that doesn't want to throw the. No. It's two teams that don't want to throw the football. Two teams that just only want to run the football. Two teams built to stop the run, and two teams and one team in Michigan that's great at getting after the quarterback, and then another team in Georgia that's great at squeezing you down so there's nowhere for you to go with the football. And so. Yeah, I think this is a 17-10 football game just on first glance, and I'm going to get more into it and kind of look for angles as we go. But the reality of this is this is a game where it's both. I expect both coaches to come in here with the idea of all we have to do this, and this, and we won't lose. Not coming in and saying I need to get 40 points so that we win, but saying I think if we get 20 and we hold them, we won't lose. And I think that's going to be the reality of this football game.
Elsewhere from championship weekend, Mike, I mean, what Cincinnati did to a good Houston defense, or what's been a good Houston defense throughout the course of the season, I thought was impressive. Of course, Baylor in the goal line stand with the upset of Oklahoma State was as dramatic a finish as any we saw in the sport this weekend. Who put the performance on the field from a schematic and game plan standpoint that impressed Michael Felder the most?
Oof. Oklahoma State's defense is still up there for me.
Yeah.
I thought they did a really good job. I thought Ritter was very safe with the football for Cincinnati against a Houston team that we know has been opportunistic. If we're going to go – the problem is Baylor didn't do it for 60 minutes, right? I know they got the win. They win the Big 12 championship. But the first, I'm going to call it 27 minutes, 26 minutes of this football game, I thought Baylor had a significant schematic edge, because they used that tight end in a way that really flustered and frustrated and confused Oklahoma State's defense to the point where they had to get to halftime to fix it. So that first half from Baylor I thought was remarkable. I think Alabama goes on the list as well with what they were able to do and how they were able to adjust. But I'll go, because I don't want to give Alabama all the credit for everything, and I don't want to give. I can't pick a losing team as that answer. So I'm going to go with Baylor because of their ability from an offensive standpoint to use the tight end. Sims in the seam, when you run cover zero, and then you use your linebackers to kind of spring out wide to take away the slant, Baylor snuck the tight end right underneath those guys, and multiple times big plays down the field. And I thought that was really cool to watch. And I thought that was something that was it literally. And I think I tweeted about this, but that was Dave Aranda getting into Jim Knowles' skin and realizing where is the weakness in this defense, and then translating that to his offensive coordinator and finding a way to make that work. Now, it didn't work in the second half. Obviously, they went scoreless, but that's because Oklahoma State adjusted, which I do think speaks to their ability from a technical standpoint. That defense played well enough to win. If my guy turns it upfield instead of diving for the pylon, they're probably playing in the playoff.
I was visibly upset with Dave Aranda that he didn't get more excited by the way that they won that game on the sideline. Like, it visibly upset me that he didn't have more energy than that. But I think he expended it all trying, as you said, to get in the opposing defense's skin for Oklahoma State and find ways to take advantage of it. Certainly the first half. And honestly, Mike, I would have had tremendous respect for you if you would have come on this radio show and made the argument for a losing team putting on the best performance of the weekend. I would have had tremendous respect. I have tremendous respect for you. It would have been amplified times 10 if you'd have done that successfully.
I mean, the biggest thing for me, I thought Oklahoma State's defense was really, really good. They got caught off guard a couple times. Oh, by the way, throw 4 interceptions and let me know what defense doesn't give up 21 points.
Right.
So there was that. They rebounded. They did really well. I'm going to pick the winner, but, yeah, I love the way they played. Oh, and by the way, I thought Iowa's defense, they did as much as they could until they got beat up.
No, I won't hear Iowa. That's the one wrong answer.
They did as much as they could until they got beat up.
Mike, I can't deal with it.
There was a point in the game where we had a missed run fit that was a long touchdown, and then we had a trick play that was a long touchdown. Those were the 2 touchdowns they gave up initially. If their offense can score at all, we're looking at a 17-10 football game going into the half instead of whatever it was that we had. If they had an offense that had a pulse, things could be better.
Mike, when they lose to Kentucky in the Citrus Bowl, it's not going to be because of their defense. It's going to be because their offense makes me want to throw up on myself. But I'm still not going to want to hear about Iowa because I cannot stand Kirk Ferentz coach teams. Cannot stand them.
I understand. I get it. I understand completely.
Mike Felder at In the Bleachers is where you can follow him. He's all over the place. He's on the Andy Staples Show podcast feed every week with Nicole Auerbach, doing a great job there. He's got podcasts all over the place. You can catch his breakdowns on a regular basis. He's one of the best in the business, one of the smartest in the business, and he's not got time for you if you can't keep up. That's why we love Mike. Thanks for stopping by, buddy.
Thank you so much. It's always fun. You guys take it easy.
Mike Felder of Stadium. on 104.5 The Zone. All right, Mike Vrabel's coming up at the podium. We'll go live to St. Thomas Sports Park and hear about Julio Jones, perhaps, coming up next. Welcome back. Mike Vrabel is getting ready to speak to the assembled Titans media at St. Thomas Sports Park, so we're going to head out there live here in just a second. Lucas, let me know when you got the head coach up and running, and we'll hear about all the transactions that they've just made. A reminder, Julio Jones is not off injured reserve, but he's been designated to return to practice, so we'll go now and hear from the head coach himself.
Teresa?
Partial tear of the
We don't talk about that kind of stuff.
Here you go. Too much stuff. There you go. But for your team, you've got 3 guys now designated to return. How needed, how helpful was this bye week now?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think those guys have been working extremely hard to get back. Which is what we ask everybody that isn't participating. And I felt like the training staff, the weight staff, everybody involved, the player, those particular players worked extremely hard. I think it's beneficial. One thing we talk about, as far as technology is, being able to track those guys and the speed in which that they're, running as they return. And I think that that's been really good for us to take advantage of that stuff. And I think it helps the player to be able to see, hey, here's where you were in the game. This is what you're running in the game. And then, we can track that and monitor that and show them, as they get closer so that, one, we're all on the same page and they, two, have a lot of confidence to come back.
You've urged us several times to tweet NFL officiating.
I did. I couldn't get a hold of you last night, so I went ahead and did it.
What prompted that, and what'd you think of that play?
Oh, it was, it was just, my opportunity to sit there and be a fan and watch. And I felt like, it was a good opportunity to remind everybody the rules for the process of a catch. That's all that was is my, I have that on my phone. That's on my home screen, the rule book. So I took a screenshot, figured out how to tweet it out so everybody that followed could understand what the process of a catch was and what it isn't.
Part of the issue there maybe that a time amount, there's nothing in the rule that mentions how long it has to last.
I just think that was, my opportunity to talk about the process of the catch, no different than, trying to identify instances across the league to show our players, whether that's surviving the ground, not having the ability to take that third step or make a football movement. These are all, close, critical plays. And, hopefully we can teach our players, to understand how things are being called, and then, being able to play to the recovery of the football, all those things that go into, close plays that are either ruled turnovers or could potentially be reviewed and, have to have clear recovery. So there's a lot of things that go into it. It's an extremely fast game. We had one last week, Anthony, the whistle hadn't blown. Anthony picked the ball up, which, we're instructing him to, whether there was a whistle, I don't think there was, to run and make them stop you. He recovered it, but then again, the play continued to go. I don't know why, but then somebody knocked it out of his hands. Taylor picked him with 2 fumbles on the play and lost, 4 or 5 yards, whatever it was. So, there's a lot of those plays that come up that we just try to make sure our guys understand, how we want to try to execute them.
You had to scale back maybe how much speed you could practice with in recent weeks. You hope you can kind of get back to more of that?
I think so. I think we're it's going to be real critical that we focus on our fundamentals, our conditioning, practicing with some speed as we, head in here to December. All those things that make a difference in football games, taking care of the football, trying to disrupt it, going back to the double periods, Luke, at the beginning and then, halfway through to try to see if we can find a way to turn it over and go find those opportunities and then take care of it.
As you evaluate Ryan over the course of this season, how significant is it to you that he obviously hasn't had his top skill guys?
Well, it's a complete thing, Gentry. It is. It's a whole package. but we all have a job, whether it's mine, or it's the coordinators, the position coaches, to get guys ready to play, to find ways to win football games. And as the quarterback, that that has to be the same thing, and understanding who's out there, understanding what we're trying to get done with the play, taking care of the football. But then, everybody else has a job to do as well, as far as protection and making sure that we're firm in the middle of the pocket, that we're staying inside out on the edges, that we're winning, that we're identifying. So the time for evaluation is not now, but it's the time for teaching and trying to improve as we work our way here into December is probably what the most important thing is.
Earlier in the year, you had mentioned Anthony Burker as a guy that you wanted to feature in the red zone. Obviously, that isn't happening as much. So what's going on there? How can you guys get him better involved?
Well, I don't, necessarily know that it's featuring any one person. It's about being efficient and scoring touchdowns when we're down there. Whether we run it in, whether we throw it, we have to, continue to focus on fighting through the fringe and finishing drives with points. And if Anthony's down there and he's open, I'm confident that Ryan will throw him the ball, just like if anybody else is open or whoever we hand it off to. That's the most important thing. It's not about one guy trying to feature, somebody and split them out and throw fades to a tight end. I don't know if that's going to be in the game plan this week, but it's about being efficient and scoring and fighting through that fringe area where we've, haven't been very good.
Why hasn't he been open down there?
Well, whether he, I don't know if he hasn't been open. He hasn't been in a game. There's different personnel packages, and again, his main role right now is third down and special teams. So, there's a lot of reasons, whether he's in the game or he's not in the game. Guys are open. The space is limited. Space is limited down in the red zone for everybody. You have to run. If we get open quickly and identify whether it's man or zone, and they're passing you off, and we have to be, get the ball out of our hands. You see how quickly things happen down there, like the end of the Pittsburgh game.
It's not a full evaluation you'll do at the end of the year, but were you able to do kind of a self-scout last week, given the bodies that have been in and out the last 2 weeks, and how much can that help you over the final month?
Well, I think we're always, trying to do that, whether that's a bye week or an opportunity during the regular season after the game to try to figure out, what it is that we're doing well, what it is that we have some confidence in, things that we need to improve, and making sure, again, this is a focus on fundamentals, this focus on conditioning, not letting, our conditioning be a factor down the stretch here now that it's December, focusing on trying to eliminate bad football. That would be a huge key in our success here down the stretch.
Mike, do you argue that what you got from Hilliard and Foreman against New England is something that you can build on going forward to kind of make the running game the most stable part of the offense, like it was with Derek?
Oh, I think we have to, to continue down that path. I thought there were some really good efforts. I thought there were some plays that were well blocked, and we can't fumble. We can't. Everybody that we handed the ball off to fumbled in that game, so that's going to lose you games.
Mike, speaking about Derek, how is he doing at this point? Do you feel good about where he is?
He won't be out there this week. He won't be out there this week, Ben. That's all I can tell you, but I think he's doing okay.
You hit the practice field, but you feel like the bye week and some time did some guys some good as far as decompressing a little bit?
I think so. I think so. There was we worked through some moving parts this morning trying to get everybody tested and make sure that everybody was healthy, which is the case. We tried to, I had to push some meetings back just a little bit because, you got a bunch of guys waiting out there to wait on test results and everything else. But I felt like the entire staff and Sal and the testers and everybody handled that really well. And the guys came in and we tried to keep an open mind and just understand that there were going to be a lot of moving parts today to get guys back into the building coming off the bye. And then we'll see how hopefully, guys are moving around with some energy at practice.
As you get more guys back.
That's Mike Vrabel. at the podium at St. Thomas Sports Park. So, breaking news, Derrick Henry will not be out there today. So, a lot of stuff to peel through and to discuss based on, the Julio Jones situation and Mike Vrabel's tweet, which we haven't discussed really yet, regarding NFL officiating, because he took his own advice that he gave to us a couple of weeks ago when he told us if we have questions about the rule book, the officials have a Twitter handle. And I think that Mike got the response to his tweeting at NFL officiating that we all have gotten when we tweet at NFL officiating, which is dead quiet. So we'll talk about that. We'll let you hear from the head coach. Again, coming up next, and we'll have a discussion about the Titans and where they stand after the bye, because even without playing a football game, they find themselves in pretty good position, and it could be improved by tonight's result between the Patriots at the Bills. That's coming up next. Your phone calls as well, 615-737-1045. I'm Buck Reising. This is 1045 The Zone. Hour number 3 off and rolling on this Monday. Welcome back into 104.5 The Zone. Buck Reising here with you until 1 o'clock. Lucas Panzica making it all happen. We got Mac behind the scenes, learning at the feet of Lucas, or maybe not quite the feet. I don't want to get too descriptive. It sounds like an HR violation. Regardless, if you want to get involved in the proceedings, you can. We're going to talk some Titans over this final hour. Our buddy Trevor Sikkema for Pro Football Focus is going to join us at 12:20 as well. He was at the Big Ten title game, and, once he suffered through the abomination that is the Iowa Hawkeyes football program, was able to glean some good insights and analysis about what Michigan is and what they may be capable of against Georgia. If you want to jump in on the conversation, 615-737-1045 is the number, 615-737-1045 is how you do so. What is the greatest threat remaining to this Titans team is the question that I would like to ask you, 615-737-1045. Who, at this point, understanding that Buffalo and the Patriots will play tonight in Buffalo and that this will be another opportunity for the Titans to reclaim the top spot in the AFC, who stands out as the greatest threat? Because Kansas City looks like they've gotten right after their early season struggles. They may not be perfect, but they're good enough, and they've got arguably the most talented quarterback in the sport. You are seeing the pesky Indianapolis Colts, who just I saw my buddy Zach Kiefer, who covers the Colts for The Athletic, tweet out, I don't know how the Titans lost to this Texans team. And it's funny, Zach, because we are all 3 weeks later, still asking ourselves that question here in Nashville. How the hell did the Titans lose to a 1-8 at the time Texans team? Because they are an atrocity. They are an abomination. They are to the NFL what Iowa football is to college at this point. I still don't understand it. Make it make sense. But the Colts are hanging around, and they keep beating up on bad teams. You have the Bills, who I don't think have yet found their footing, but have the opportunity to get right tonight and try and reclaim their position in the AFC East. And then elsewhere, I mean, the Raiders lost yesterday. The Ravens, I don't know what to make of them, but I don't think they're that good, which is, I mean, they have Lamar Jackson, so you can't rule them out. He is as electric a football player, a performer, and as game-changing a playmaker as any that exists. But their offense looks clunky to me. And frankly, I find it an indictment of their offensive coordinator, Greg Roman, that they still haven't resolved some of the issues that are causing Lamar to be in these positions where there's just no easy completions for them. And certainly in the red zone, they haven't figured it out. That's probably the greatest indictment of the Ravens thus far. So do you fear any of these teams? Do you fear the Patriots, who you could have beaten with Lucas and I at running back? It was a game plan that was devised to beat New England at New England and would have worked had you not had 4 turnovers and 2 of them being back-breaking fumbles. It's inexcusable the way that they lost both of those games, frankly, but you cannot change the result after the fact, and you can only hope after the bye week that they've rectified some of their concerns, the greatest of which, of course, is the health of the football team. Now, you'll hear from Mike Vrabel about Julio Jones, about Golden Tate, who we have seen precious little of. You'll notice that of the transactions that were made, Golden Tate wasn't among them. That's pretty interesting to note for a player who's been on the roster now for at least 2 weeks. But if I'm going through the list of things that the Titans need to accomplish or needed to accomplish while not playing a game in their Week 13 bye, rest and recovery is, of course, at the forefront. But you need the Bills to win tonight. You needed the Steelers to beat the Ravens. They did. The Texans over the Colts would have been nice. It would have been a cherry on top of your bye week Sunday. Unfortunately, that was not the result you got if you're a Titans fan. The Colts rolled Houston with great ease. The Chargers beating the Bengals in a game that I thought that Justin Herbert was not the better player between he and Joe Burrow. I thought Joe Burrow was far better as a quarterback, as a player of that position than what I saw, and then things got away from Cincinnati throughout the course of that game. But there were 3 wow throws that I saw Justin Herbert make, and the rest has been honestly pretty pedestrian. Like, his average air yards per attempt is not that much better than somebody like Teddy Bridgewater, for example. So this Justin Herbert hype, I think, while I do believe him to be a great, I mean, I can't call him a prospect. He's a pro now, but you understand what I'm saying. Like, I think that there is a high ceiling for Justin Herbert. I just think it's being over-exaggerated slightly at this point. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying, all right, there's a number of things that the Titans needed to fall their way. The Bengals losing to the Chargers, big. Of course, the Broncos could not beat the Chiefs. And Washington, the Washington football team, the mighty, resurgent Washington football team, who every time I watch one of their games, it's just a rotating symbol. You know how you see the Titans rotating symbol on the CBS graphic when they go to commercial break? It's just a football team rotating in my face over and over again. It's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen, that still, 3 years later almost, they haven't found a name for the Washington football team. Regardless, they beat the Raiders, and that's a result that benefits the Titans too. So it's a pretty good bye week thus far. The cherry would be, of course, the Bills over the Patriots, which would allow you to reclaim the top spot in the AFC. The Patriots taking a 5th loss despite having 8 wins, the same way that the Titans do. But all of this to say that the most important thing at this point is for this football team to get healthy. And the health of the football team is what absolutely had to be prioritized, particularly at the wide receiver position, where you're looking at Julio Jones, who has not been cleared from injured reserve, but you are seeing that they are trying to do things to rectify the fact that both Marcus Johnson and A.J. Brown are still on that list, as is Julio Jones, until such time as he's cleared to return to the active roster, at this point only being cleared to return to practice after having satisfied his minimum 3 games off. Golden Tate is still somebody who remains out there and available to the Titans on their practice squad. But among the transactions that were made today by the Titans, Golden Tate was not among them. And I'll run back through those for you just to make sure that you are aware if you missed any of that. Tuzar Skipper, the outside linebacker, was signed to the practice squad. Julio Jones, Racey McMath, and Dane Cruikshank all eligible to return from practice, but still on IR. John Simon was waived from the active roster, meaning that they have a spot available for somebody to take. And Austin Fort, who was on the practice squad reserve COVID-19 list, has since been restored to the practice squad. So none of those transactions for a second straight week, and it only being Monday, none of them involve Golden Tate. It could still happen, but he is not far enough along with learning the offense at this point to understand where they are, or to be able to help them in a way that's substantial from the coaching staff's opinion. And this was Mike Vrabel earlier today speaking on Golden Tate.
Golden continues to work with Rob and to Eric and, Frank on his conditioning. And, we'll see where his level of, understanding of the offense is. And, he's been a great pro. He's been engaged and locked in every meeting that I've had. And I've enjoyed, getting to know him, getting to work with him and watching him.
All that's well and good, but he's not contributing anything. I mean, he's going through practices. That's fine. And Mike Vrabel said he's been a professional. That's fine too, I guess. But when can we expect meaningful snaps from a veteran wide receiver who is brought in to help just help them survive, basically, this period where their top 3 wideouts still, even though Julio's cleared to return to practice, still remain on IR? At some point, you need more. We'll come back to this conversation. We'll be joined by our buddy Trevor Sikkema of Pro Football Focus coming up next. He was at the Big Ten title game in Indy, and of course, his analysis is somebody who I trust very much as far as scouting these guys is concerned. And with this college football Final Four being set, I want to know if there's an actual way that Michigan can play, if not beat, Georgia at this point, Vegas ruling them the underdog by, let's see, some opening lines. I don't see, actually, the opening line just yet for Georgia, Michigan. So we'll come back and discuss that with Trevor Sikkema coming up next. I'm Buck Reising. It's 104.5 The Zone. Welcome back. Buck Reising here with you till 1 o'clock for a show back. Hope everybody's enjoying it as much as we are. Getting ready to discuss some of the results of the college football weekend, championship weekend, of course. A little draft talk and maybe even some NFL because our buddy Trevor Sikkema of Pro Football Focus, he does it all. You know him well at Tampa Bay. Trey is where you can follow him. My guy, how we living?
Oh, right, Buck, we're living large. You know that's the only answer to that. We're living large, my man. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Always a pleasure. Now, I heard you made a trip to the state of my youth, the state of my birth, this weekend to watch Iowa score 3 points. How did that leave you satisfied, 42-3 in the Big Ten title game?
I don't know if Iowa left anybody satisfied that day other than the people who were wearing maize and blue cheering for Michigan on the other side of things. No, the Big Ten championship was great. That was the first time that I actually had been in the stadium at Lucas Oil. I'd been to many, many combines, but fun fact for everybody out there, when you cover the combine as a media member, you're not actually in the stadium.
They don't let
you
you anywhere near it.
Right. You're right down the road in the Civic Center. So that was cool. I finally got to go in the stadium. Beautiful stadium, wonderful stadium. Loved being there. Great to see Michigan really get over the top and finally make the most of finally getting to that Big Ten title game. And so that was great. It was great seeing a good team really win, especially a team that we knew was going to make the college football playoff if they won. They won in emphatic fashion, and it was a great time. Really enjoyed it.
So I'm glad that you had a good time, and I'm shocked to hear. I guess I'm not shocked to hear that it's your first time in the stadium. I despise that press box, though. It's all the way up. It gives me vertigo every time, especially when all my college buddies live in Indianapolis, and the Saturday before is filled with much debauchery. That press box is a death sentence. But what I see from Michigan, Trevor, is impressive. Particularly the way that they do it. I know we make a lot of jokes on social media, or at least dumb people like me do, about the Big Ten style of football and 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Well, Michigan is like 7 yards in a cloud of dust with the way that they play and how heavily they rely and emphasize their running attack. I'm curious, as based on what you saw, understanding that Iowa's defense probably played a much better game than the final score indicated, or at least for the first half, to try and hold Michigan down. Does that hold up against a team like Georgia, who will, of course, be their opponent in the semifinal of the playoff?
Yeah, I think all opinions on Georgia are kind of up in the air, right? Because we didn't really think that we would see what we saw this past weekend with how much they really struggled against Alabama. And I get it. It's Nick Saban. It's Alabama. Them winning was not something that was out of the question. But you do kind of have to let things now creep in your mind. You go, okay, well, you're right. Georgia really hasn't played that good of opponents this year. And they've taken care of business, and they've absolutely dominated in historic fashion. But when you look at, Alabama's basically the only good team they've played outside of, if you want to call Clemson at the beginning of the year a good team, which I don't at that time. You go, all right, well, how good really are they? We're going to get to see where it's a great barometer, them going up against Michigan. You mentioned how Michigan likes to play, and my hat is all the way off to Josh Gaddis, the offensive coordinator for Michigan, and how he has been able to really get a top 15 scoring offense out of that philosophy, that Harbaugh kind of style where, they're going to run the football. That's just their identity. And I've said it this year, especially as time has gone on and Michigan has continued to win. This is like Harbaugh's perfect team. Very good, experienced defense. You got guys flying around and making plays on the defensive side of the ball, holding teams very well. They're a top 10 team in the country when it comes to scoring defense. But then on the other side of the ball, it's a game manager quarterback. They've got multiple running backs they can go to and have a lot of faith in. And then they do have playmakers as pass catchers at both wide receiver and tight end. And so, it's not this air raid, throw it, like tons of air yards kind of offense, but it was never going to be that. And so that's why I do think it's a really interesting test, them going up against Georgia. It's more into the teeth of what you would think Georgia does well defensively. And so I think it is going to be a slugfest between those two teams facing off. I'm excited that we get to see these two teams because sort of the same kind of brand of football, but just who is going to play it better, right? And I think you've got two of the best defensive lines in the country going up against each other. It's going to be a blast. I'm excited to see it. Love what Michigan's been able to do this year. And if you're a fan of Harbaugh, you got to absolutely love the brand that he's been able to put out this year.
Trevor Sikkema of Pro Football Focus is our guest here on 104.5 The Zone. Of course, on Sundays, you can catch the PFF NFL show, which features Trevor, among other great panelists discussing that week's action every week, streaming live on social media channels. Make sure you're following at PFF to check that out. I love that Michigan has somehow turned into this lovable underdog, Trevor. I don't understand how it happens. It's a blue blood program, but I'm seeing Brian Kelly fake Southern accents and leaving what would be otherwise a destination job. I'm seeing, people jumping from Oklahoma and Lincoln Riley to USC, teams or programs rather, that we imagine to be career final stops, basically, until the school decides that they're done with you. You don't leave programs like that, and instead it's happening all over the place. Michigan is one of these places, and Jim Harbaugh is a known commodity, and now I'm seeing, I don't want to call it a narrative, but it's almost like people are looking at them and saying, oh, yeah, good for the little guy, when it's not at all the little guy.
Well, I think that just goes to show you how dominant Ohio State has been over the last 5 and 6 years for us to sit here and consider Michigan the little guy. And I'm with you. I was somebody who, I poked fun at Jim Harbaugh so many times over the last couple of years. He can never get over the hump. He's never going to beat Ohio State, all this kind of – I remember having my fun at his expense. But there is no doubt about it that last year and this year specifically – I wanted to see him win. Yeah. I wanted to see him get over the hump. College football is fun when Michigan is good. It is fun when these top-tier teams, these historic rivalries, continue to mean something. I think Ohio State versus Michigan is one of the best rivalries, not just in college football, but all of sports. It's about time Michigan got back in the fight, and I love the fact that they made the most of finally making that Big Ten championship game. And so I love it. I'm with everybody. I've had my fun at Harbaugh's expense for the last couple of years, but I do love it. I do love that feeling of getting to root for him, seeing him in the college football playoff. It's about time. I really do believe that college football can be at its best when a lot of their biggest brands, these destination schools, if you will, just continue to put their name in the conversation, especially when it's a new name that we haven't seen in a couple of years. So even though I'm not going to sit here and say that Michigan's the overwhelming favorite, I don't even know if I'm going to pick them over Georgia. I'm glad they're here. This is a great team. It's a fun team to root for. And because I haven't said his name yet, and I need to, Aiden Hutchinson, man, their pass rusher. I got to see him live for the first time this past weekend, and I've watched him plenty on tape. I knew he was going to be a top 10, top 5 prospect just watching him off of the game tape. In person, it's an even different animal. Iowa went into that game plan saying, we're going to double team, we're going to triple team, we're going to run away from this guy, and it did not matter. 97 on Michigan, made so many plays. He made an impact. He made his presence known with all of that extra attention. He can absolutely be a number 1 pick when we see the draft come to fruition in April.
I just hate that he's going to end up somewhere like, in the AFC South with the Jacksonville Jaguars or the Houston Texans. I hate that for this man who is by far and away a tremendous talent, especially in a year, Trevor, where the quarterback class is not, certainly not what it has been the past couple of years and is down from what we are accustomed to seeing with how much more refined that position has gotten. And I'm curious from your perspective, having watched these guys on tape, I'm certain a fair amount. My opinion is biased based on this weekend and seeing a fake slide touchdown for Kenny Pickett. I've decided that he is, in my mind, quarterback 1, and I will hear no discussions to the contrary. But why is Kenny Pickett superior from your perspective in what he's being asked to do against somebody like Matt Corral, where you understand that the offenses are helping both of these guys, but they, in a quarterback class that is less than, are clearly and obviously better than the rest of what's available?
Yeah, you talk about America falling in love with Michigan. I think that America has also started to really fall in love with Kenny Pickett, and that came to a crescendo this past weekend when you saw the fake slide in the ACC championship game. Obviously, people probably dug into the numbers and saw what a historic year he's been having. He's awesome, and I've been on record saying this, that he's the Joe Burrow of this season. Now, of course, it's not as record-breaking. It's not as emphatic as Joe Burrow's was because of the talent that he had around him. But when everybody sits here and they go, okay, who was a guy who was probably a day 3 prospect who could really vault himself up into the first-round conversation? That's Kenny Pickett. That's what Kenny Pickett's been able to do this season. He's played a long time for Pitt. He's been in the Pitt program for quite a while, and you're going to see his name at the top of a lot of Pitt passing records when he hangs it up because of it. And when you look at his career, I think that it would be safe to say that it was pretty average up until this year. He was just going to go down as a nice college quarterback and a guy who had a lot of experience, played a lot of games for Pitt, and that was kind of going to be the end of the story. This year was just so night and day different. He's been unbelievable. The confidence that he has in that offense, operating what he does there, you love to see it. And anytime you have that kind of moxie, that kind of confidence, and those kinds of results, you got to pay attention. So whether he's unquestioned QB1 or not, I'm not sure. We'll get into a lot of that over the next couple of months for sure. But with a down quarterback class, he's absolutely putting his name in the conversation to potentially be QB1. You know, you mentioned a guy like Matt Corral. You know, he operates a Lane Kiffin offense, whereas, you know, you look at the success that Matt Corral is having, and you like it. I don't want to take anything away from him. I really don't, because I think that Matt Corral's got a great arm. He's a talented runner. He's improved every single year, and that's been fantastic. But there's no doubt about it that Lane Kiffin has made life very easy on quarterbacks with how he schemes things up, how he consistently attacks both man and zone coverages. He's just a great offensive coordinator and a quarterback's best friend in that regard. So when things happen where it's not as on script as it might be at Ole Miss, what kind of a quarterback is Matt Corral? And I'm not sure we get the answer to that before his NFL debut comes around. So that's something that a lot of people are going to think about. Sam Howell from UNC's in that conversation as well. Malik Willis, Carson Strong, so many guys that I think that you could put into this conversation. Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati as well. A lot of guys to talk about, but it's not the same as it was last year, where there were still 5 or 6 names that you liked, and 5 of them are going to the top 15. I think there's 5 or 6 names to be had in the quarterback conversation for this draft. The only problem is it's going to be scattered, I think, between the first 3 rounds, not the first 15 picks.
And, of course, you can read Trevor's analysis of all of these guys. He's one of the best doing it as far as the pre-draft scouting process is concerned at PFF, where they are offering a last chance 40% off sale. Promo code CYBER40 saves you 40% off of your first-time PFF subscription. Check that out whenever you get a moment. I want to pivot to some NFL stuff with you, Trevor, because I'm laughing. There's a Rap Sheet tweet that has just come up on my timeline as we've been having this discussion. Quote, there were plenty of warning signs for Panthers offensive coordinator Joe Brady, whose first stint as an NFL OC ended Sunday. And I saw the tweets coming out of Carolina yesterday about Matt Rule wanted him to run the ball 30 to 35 times a game or something ridiculous like that, and he underwhelmed as far as meeting that expectation was concerned. The Joe Brady experience, given how young he is as a coordinator and what he had to work with, I find it ridiculous that this is the narrative being created around this guy that got fired yesterday.
Yeah, it's tough because you figure that there's probably some things behind the scenes at play going on here. I have no idea what that is. I've seen people report things here and there, but I don't know the validity. I don't know the truth to it.
Sure.
Everybody always loves to grasp at straws or rumors or whatever that either defends their guy or defends their team or whatever it is. But I've got to think that there really is – there's got to be something else going on with the situation in Carolina, because the way that I look at it at surface value, you can say whatever you want about Joe Brady being a young offensive coordinator, a guy who flew too close to the sun, if you will, with his rise and how he went from LSU to Carolina. But look at his quarterbacks while he has been in Carolina. It's Teddy Bridgewater, it's Sam Darnold, and it's Cam Newton. I mean, Carolina has been fine. I don't think Carolina's been a laughing stock, especially on their offensive side of the football. Okay, you want to run the ball a lot. Well, I don't really have the offensive line to run the ball as much as you guys would want us to, because if we're running the ball that much, we're probably not giving ourselves a chance to win football games, especially given the success rate that they would probably have behind an offensive line that has to be drastically improved. You know, you look at this season and even look at last season, I thought Brady was fine as a first-time NFL offensive coordinator with Teddy Bridgewater as his quarterback. You go into this year and you give him Sam Darnold and a aging, maybe somewhat still broken Cam Newton behind and a makeshift offensive line at best, and I don't know what you want. I don't know what more you would want. And them saying, hey, we want to run the ball more, well, no, you certainly don't now with Christian McCaffrey out. So all of that to say, there's got to be something else at play here. And I think this maybe more speaks to Matt Rule's situation. Is this a scapegoat firing? Is the Matt Rule tenure in Carolina not as solidified as we think that it might be? All of that kind of swirls around my mind as we kind of get to the bottom of what this firing might be in a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months from now.
From one struggling offense to another, the Titans are hosting the Jags this week, and we've seen them earlier in the year, Week 5. Trevor Lawrence doing all that he can. There doesn't seem to be enough playmakers on that offense. I'm wondering what you've made of the Bevel-Trevor Lawrence relationship as far as coordinator and coach are concerned, because at this point, I'm as I talked about, feeling bad for Aiden Hutchinson potentially ending up in the AFC South with one of these teams. I feel terrible for Trevor Lawrence because I cannot watch that and think that he is not being done. There's not enough being done around him, whether that's because of lack of roster talent or because of what they are calling as far as schematics are concerned, to put this player in the best possible position to succeed.
Yeah, I can't buy anything that Jacksonville's selling right now. I really can't. I don't have a lot of faith in Urban Meyer. I don't have a lot of faith in that staff as they are under Urban Meyer. I don't hate Darrell Bevell as an offensive play caller. I really don't. But, you look at the weapons that he has with just Marvin Jones and the weird usage of Laviska Shenault and the tight end room being as bare as it is, the running back room lacking star power. I mean, I like James Robinson as much as the next guy. But, they just need so much more there. I just feel like they have Trevor Lawrence, and they're asking Trevor Lawrence to make up for an abundance of sins that they have had along the team-building side of things in Jacksonville for many years. Now, I will say this kind of in defense, and maybe people who might be freaking out about Lawrence or his situation or it's worse than we thought, Lawrence was always probably going to struggle in his first year in the NFL, because a lot of what Lawrence did at Clemson, for as much as he had the phenomenal passes deep down the field, the back shoulder ropes to the sideline, all that, we have examples of that he threw at Clemson, but the majority of his offense was not that. It was shorter stuff. It was dump-offs. It was screens. It was slants. It was much more ticky-tacky things that Clemson's better athletes were just able to execute very well. And I think the flashes of showing what he could do deeper down the field in the intermediate and deep portions, that gave us faith that, okay, this guy's obviously got the NFL arm. And I thought that Trevor Lawrence was the clear-cut QB1 from last year's group. But I knew it was going to be a little bit of a development for not just whatever bad team he was going to go to, but also for him as a quarterback, because things were going to get different. That Clemson style of quick hit, short throw offense was not going to survive in the NFL. He was going to have to evolve as the rest of his team would. So I didn't expect a all-world kind of year from Trevor Lawrence no matter what this season. But it just is hard for me to believe in Urban Meyer the way that things currently are in Jacksonville. And I just hope very much so that Jacksonville and his current regime does not, for lack of a better word, waste one of the better quarterback talents that we have seen in a lot of years. Because Trevor Lawrence could be very, very special. They've just got to have the right guys in the building to where when he struggles, it is struggles that will yield evolution, that will yield a step ahead that he can learn from, not just struggles to spin your wheels and constantly go in circles.
I feel the exact same way, but everybody in my audience is actively rooting for this Jacksonville Trevor Lawrence thing to implode upon itself. But for the sake of fun watching Trevor Lawrence succeed at this level, I am 100% aligned with you. Trevor Sikkema at Tampa Bay Trey is where you can follow him. You can watch him on the Pro Football Focus NFL show every Sunday morning before that week's games begin. And, of course, you can check out his work at pff.com. Buddy, I appreciate you taking some time. Thanks for stopping by.
Of course, Buck. Anytime, my friend.
Trevor Sikkema, kind enough to make us smarter about what's going on in the world of college and pro football at this point. Show's over, basically. We'll do some polls coming up next. It's been a while. I heard you held out on the polls without me. Was this under protest? Are you just trying to carve out your own lane? What happened?
It's taking a break from the polls. The show's not over. I resent that. Show's over. Get out of here.
Maybe I'll get out of here. Coming up next. One more segment to go on this Monday. Been lovely to be back in the saddle. Hope you guys have had as much fun as we have had today. Lucas was telling me that Bleacher Report just sent him a push notification on Mario Cristobal at Miami, the deal that he's gotten. Lucas, do you have the details for people on that?
Details from Bleacher Report, sources saying 10 years and the highest assistant coach salary pool in the ACC.
Now, it's interesting to follow along. One, because Miami is similar to Tennessee and one of these formerly great programs that is aspiring to achieve greatness that's long gone in quite some time. Tennessee seems to be making better progress even throughout all of their stumbles and blunders as far as coaching hires are concerned than Miami is. Miami has been an unholy mess.
I did some digging on this actually with Will last Thursday, maybe Friday, where I literally took.
Where did you do the digging?
Looking at season-by-season records of Miami and Tennessee since then, and it is eerily similar.
I was going to give you the opportunity to plug the Ultimate Tennessee podcast because I assume that's what.
No, we just did it on your show. But both have had one 10-win season since 2004. Both are on their sixth head coach since 2004. Both have had one division title with no conference titles since 2004. The only difference is Tennessee has 6 bowl wins. Miami has 2, and one of them is the MPC Computers Bowl in 2006, a company that went bankrupt in 2008.
I want to read this clip quickly from Stuart Mandel on the Miami job because this has brought about some controversy. Because you mentioned that he's now got the largest financial pool for assistant coaches to pull from in the country. Per Manny Navarro of The Athletic, Miami is preparing to throw $8 million a year at Cristobal, $9 million to buy him out of Oregon, and $7 to $8 to buy out Diaz, Manny Diaz, that is. Where is the money coming from, you ask? And here is the excerpt from the story. Until recently, Miami's administration had been unwilling to allocate funds to the athletic department, instead leaving it to cover all expenses on its own. But the success of Miami's U-Health system, which made more than $400 million in profits last year, and promises from big-time boosters and donors to back upgrades at Miami, changed the school's stance.
Yeah, I rebuke that in the name of Jesus.
$400 million of pandemic ill-gotten gains makes you comfortable hiring a college football coach. That makes me sick to my stomach. So I need something to brighten up my life. I need the polls.
Oh, Nelly, this is Keith Jackson talking about college football. It's time to stop the count. The polls have closed and the granddaddy of them all has been tallied. With your poll update, Oh Nelly, talking about Buck Reising Show producer and daily correspondent, Lucas Panzica.
You can vote on the polls, as always, at Buck Reising, even when apparently I'm not here. To the club.
College football playoff chair Gary Barta said they did not put Bama at 1 just to avoid an SEC championship game rematch in the semifinal. Do you believe him? Yeah. 70% say no.
Gary Barta is, I'm sure, a nice man. I'm sure a respectable man. I'm sure a man of some repute, even though, isn't he the athletic director at Iowa?
Yes.
I take all of that back. I hate your football program, Gary, and I don't believe you either. He did that on purpose.
He'll be hiring Mark Stoops at some point after the Kentucky Wildcats defeat them in the Citrus Bowl.
Kirk Ferentz survived the racist strength coach, but he cannot survive 3 points in the Big Ten championship game. Disgusting.
Which college football program had the best weekend? 57% say Bama, 27% Michigan, 15% Cincinnati. A few submissions. Topher says Utah winning their first ever Pac-12 title.
I love that Utah just exists to beat the holy hell out of Oregon. That delights me for some reason. I don't know why. But, it's Alabama. It's Nick Saban saying, I drank your rat poison this week through a straw, sit on it, and spin. My quarterback is going to win the Heisman Trophy, and we're the number 1 team in the college football playoff again.
Who is QB1 in the 2022 NFL Draft? 56% going with Kenny Pickett, 44% going with Matt Corral.
I think it's an interesting conversation, and our buddy Trevor Sikkema and Mike Felder, by the way, if you missed any of the interviews, check the podcast out. I think that there is a larger conversation to be had between Pickett and Corral. I cannot help my bias is overwhelming, given that I heard Mark Jones yell sauce time on a Kenny Pickett fake slide touchdown run. Like, that wins it for me. That's QB1. I will hear no other arguments.
Ball fans, are you happy with the Music City Bowl bid? 75% say yes, 25% no. Wanted a Florida Bowl.
A Florida Bowl?
Outback,
okay.
Gator.
As long as it's not the Mayo Bowl, because I love you Vols fans, but I don't want to see any of you bathing in mayonnaise.
Mike does indeed say no. I wanted the Mayo Bowl.
Okay, well, Mike can take a bath in the mayonnaise the way that the Duke's Mayo Bowl executive was having to come out and apologize after the fact because they promised some kind of mayo bath. I'm sure there's all kind of health issues with that, so now they're offering like $10,000.
Isn't there a Cheez-It bath at the Cheez-It Bowl?
I'm certain. It's just the bowl season is a complete and utter. It's a delight, but it's just such a ridiculous thing, especially the mayonnaise. I can't understand the obsession with the mayonnaise.
Would it not have been a good fit for Tennessee to be in a bowl game named after a condiment?
Listen, I just want them to be here so I don't have to, because I can go to this and I don't have to travel. The less travel I can have in my life at this time of year, I'm a big fan of.
It is South Carolina, North Carolina, I believe, in the Mayo Bowl, which I think is kind of interesting.
No, I think for the purposes of intrigue, now that's not going to do a television rating. Nobody's going to watch that other than people in the northern and southern iterations of Carolina, but I'm interested to see that game regardless, especially because Sam Howell has a lot to prove as far as the pre-draft process is concerned. It's great to be back. We're going to do it again tomorrow at 10 a.m. Many thanks to Lucas and to Will Bowling and to Austin Stanley and to Kayla Anderson and to everybody who made it possible for me to take a week off. But we're back, and we're not going anywhere, at least not until football season's over. So we'll do it again tomorrow at 10 a.m. And in the meantime, Blaine and Mickey are going to keep you entertained because they are coming up next.